Every time you explain yourself, you make one thing permanent. Not the misunderstanding you were trying to correct, not the impression you were trying to fix, the power imbalance. Here's what that looks like in real life. You make a decision, a reasonable one, yours to make. Someone questions it, not with genuine curiosity, with that specific tone that communicates, "I think I'm owed an account of this," and you feel it, the pull, almost physical, the sense that silence here would be wrong, that not explaining yourself would make you look guilty of something you haven't done. So you explain, and something happens that you almost never notice in the moment because you're focused on whether your reasoning is landing. You entered that conversation in one position, and you left it in a different one, not because of what was said, not because of who was right, because of the dynamic you accepted the moment you started explaining. You stepped into the role of defendant, and they stepped into the role of judge, not because they deserved that role, because you handed it to them through the act of treating their opinion as something that required your justification. Because the act of explaining, regardless of how well you do it, regardless of whether the other person listens, regardless of whether they ultimately agree, sends one signal that lands beneath all the words, beneath the logic, beneath the carefully constructed argument. It says, "Your opinion of me matters enough to require this from me." And once that signal lands, the dynamic is already decided. Not loudly, not dramatically. In the quiet way that most important things get decided. Before anyone announces what just happened. Most people do this because they were raised to believe that explaining themselves is a form of respect, of transparency, of maturity. It can be all of those things. When the explanation is freely chosen, when it's extracted under pressure, it's none of them. It's submission wearing the mask of communication. Marcus Aurelius had more people questioning him, more people demanding his justification, more people treating his decisions as things that required explanation than almost anyone in recorded history. Senators, generals, political rivals who questioned every move. And he returned to one idea more consistently than almost any other across the entirety of his private meditations, the ones he wrote for himself, the ones he never intended anyone to read. The only things that belong to you are your judgments, your intentions, and your choices. Everything else, including how other people interpret those choices, exists outside the territory of your actual control. He didn't write this as philosophy. He wrote it as a daily reminder not to cross the border, not to step outside the territory that was genuinely his and start working on the territory that belonged to other people's perceptions. Explaining yourself under demand is crossing that border every single time. And the cost isn't just the time spent in the explanation. It's the gradual erosion of something that's difficult to name but easy to feel when it starts to go. The internal authority that comes from knowing you don't owe anyone the inside of your reasoning. The quiet power of a person who has decided that their actions speak, and that the interpretation of those actions belongs to whoever is watching, not to them. The particular kind of respect, different from the respect extracted through argument, different from the respect earned through performance, that comes from being someone who simply cannot be pulled into the position of defendant. Before we go any further, I want to ask you something directly. Not a rhetorical question, a real one. Who in your life right now are you explaining yourself to most? Not because they've asked a genuine question, because they've positioned themselves in a way where silence feels like submission and explanation feels like the only exit. Write it in the comments. Not their name, just the relationship. A manager, a partner, a parent, a colleague who keeps questioning decisions that were never theirs to approve, a friend who makes you feel like your life choices require their sign-off. Because everything that follows, the next 25 minutes, is specifically for that relationship. And staying until the end matters, because the part most people never hear, what actually happens stage by stage over the weeks and months after you stop, is the part that will change how you understand every conversation you've been navigating wrong. This isn't a list of techniques. It's a timeline. 7 stages of what actually unfolds when you stop explaining yourself to someone who has been using your explanations as a source of control. Each stage is stranger than the last, and the 7th one is the one nobody warns you about. Let me walk you through what actually happens when you stop. Not the theory, the sequence. Stage by stage, week by week, in enough detail that when you're living through it, you'll know exactly where you are. Stage 1, the first attempt, days 1 and 2. You decide, after this video or after a conversation that finally breaks something open, that you're done explaining. Within 24 hours, you're in exactly the situation you hope to avoid. Someone makes a comment, implies something, looks at you in a particular way, and you say nothing. Or something brief. I hear you. That's not how I see it. A silence that communicates, I received that. I'm not expanding, and immediately something uncomfortable happens. They push. I'm just asking for an explanation. I think I deserve to understand your reasoning. Can you help me understand why you did that? The pull toward explanation becomes almost physical, because somewhere in how you were raised, in the way you were taught to navigate social situations, there's a deep groove that says, when someone asks for explanation, refusing makes you the difficult one, the unreasonable one, the one with something to hide. That groove is the mechanism of control, and the discomfort you feel in that moment isn't evidence you're doing something wrong. It's the sound of the groove activating on schedule and finding that the path it was programmed to follow has been deliberately blocked. Sit with it. Don't explain the discomfort. Don't explain why you're not explaining. Just let the silence do what silence does when it's allowed to. Epictetus called this carteria, the sustained endurance of pressure without modifying your position in response to pain. Not aggressive resistance, not dramatic defiance, just the quiet holding of a line you've decided, privately, is worth holding. The first attempt will feel like failure, even when it goes perfectly. That's normal. The fact that it feels wrong is what makes it work. Coming up, Stage 2 is the most physically uncomfortable stage in this entire process. Most people break here. The next 4 minutes explain exactly why, and exactly how to hold through it. Stage 2, the push harder phase. Days 3 through 10. When the first attempt to extract explanation fails, most people escalate, not dramatically, subtly. A slight coldness, a withdrawal of warmth that says, without saying it, I was owed something and I didn't receive it, and the temperature between us is going to reflect that until you correct the situation. This is the most difficult stage for almost everyone, because the coldness feels like punishment, and the instinct in the face of punishment is to end it, which means providing the explanation that was being withheld. Here's what's actually happening beneath the coldness. The person who has been using your explanations as a source of control is confronting, for the first time, an experience their nervous system wasn't prepared for. The loop they've been running, question, receive explanation, feel confirmation of position, repeat, has been interrupted. And the nervous system responds to the interruption of a familiar loop the same way it responds to any unexpected loss, with protest. The cold treatment isn't malicious, exactly. It's more primitive than malicious. It's the behavioral equivalent of pressing a button that stopped working. The same pressure, the same signal, in hopes that this time it produces the result it used to produce. Your job in Stage 2 is specific. Continue providing warmth without providing explanation. This sounds like a contradiction. It isn't. It means continuing to engage normally, pleasantly, even generously, with everything except the one thing they're trying to extract. A person who is warm and accessible in every dimension except the dimension of justifying their choices is, paradoxically, far more unsettling to someone trying to control through explanation than a person who simply goes cold in return. Coldness for coldness is a transaction they understand. They know how to operate in that space. Warmth without capitulation is something different entirely. It communicates. There's nothing wrong between us. I'm just not going to do the thing you want me to do, and I'm completely comfortable with that. That combination, warmth and immovability simultaneously, is the one they have no existing script for. And no script means no control. Stage 3. The reframing. Weeks 2 through 3. By the end of the second week, something shifts in how the situation is being narrated. By the other person, about you, possibly to others. The narrative usually takes one of a few forms. You've changed. You're being stubborn. You've become cold or distant. You think you're above explaining yourself. These narratives serve a function. They're attempts to reframe your behavior as a character flaw. Because character flaws can be corrected, while power shifts are simply new realities that require adjustment. The important thing to understand about this stage, the narrative isn't being constructed for an audience. It's being constructed for the narrator. The story they've changed, and that's the problem, protects the existing framework from having to update in response to new information. Here's the decision this stage requires. If you respond to the narrative, if you explain that you haven't changed, that you're not being cold, that you don't think you're above anything, you've handed narrative control back to the person who constructed it. You've entered their frame, accepted their terms, started arguing within a story they wrote. If you don't respond to the narrative, something more interesting happens. The narrative has to sustain itself without your participation. And narratives built to explain away discomfort rarely sustain themselves without the participation of the person they're constructed around. A story about you that you refuse to engage with, that you neither confirm nor deny, that you simply continue to live past, will either update itself in response to reality or remain forever incomplete. A thing the other person carries privately, unable to resolve itself because the person who could resolve it kept choosing not to. Both outcomes serve you better than the alternative. Seneca distinguished between two types of people: those who need to be correctly perceived by everyone, and those who have decided that the perception of people outside their actual inner circle is simply not the territory they're working in. This stage is where you discover which type you've been and which type you're choosing to become. Stage 4. The test. Weeks 3 and 4. Around week 3 or 4, something arrives that's different from the ongoing low-grade pressure of the earlier stages. A specific situation, deliberately constructed, designed to make silence feel genuinely untenable. Not just uncomfortable, untenable. An accusation specific enough that it seems to deserve a specific response. A consequence that seems like it might be mitigated by providing context. A relationship that seems like it might be damaged beyond repair by continued silence. This is the test, and it's constructed this way, consciously or not. Because the preceding weeks have demonstrated that ordinary social pressure isn't moving you, so the stakes get raised. And here's what's almost always true about the content of the test. The thing being questioned, the specific decision, the specific behavior, is almost never the actual subject. The actual subject is still, will you, under sufficient pressure, return to the position of defendant? The test is never about the accusation, it's about the frame. I want to give you a real example of what this sounds like. Someone who has been trying to extract explanation from you, a partner, a colleague, a family member, reaches a moment where they say something like, "Fine, if you won't explain yourself, I'm starting to wonder if there's something you're hiding." Normal people don't just refuse to explain things. Notice what's happened. The pressure has escalated from, "I want an explanation," to "not explaining is evidence of wrongdoing." The stakes have been raised from discomfort to character, and the pull to explain, to defend, to demonstrate you have nothing to hide, becomes almost irresistible. Here is the truth about that moment. The response that changes everything isn't the explanation. It's the demonstration that raised stakes are irrelevant to your behavior. Not because you don't care about the stakes, because you've genuinely separated what you do from what it produces in someone else's perception of you. Epictetus described this as the most common failure mode in developing genuine character. The person who can hold their position when pressure is ordinary, but who capitulates when stakes are raised. He called it the most common failure precisely because it looks like wisdom. It looks like reading a situation, being pragmatic rather than rigid. But it's not pragmatism, it's the old groove, activated by a stronger stimulus. I don't think my reasoning on this is something I need to defend. 4 words. Calm. Final. Not cold. Hold through the test. What follows is worth more than anything the explanation would have produced. Coming up, Stage 5 is the one that surprises everyone. Something begins happening around week 5 or 6 that most people can't explain but immediately recognize. I want to walk you through it carefully. Stage 5. The silence begins to speak. Month 2. Something changes around the 5 or 6 week mark. Difficult to describe precisely. Easy to recognize when you're in it. The absence of your explanation has become a presence. In most ongoing dynamics, the constant provision of justification creates a kind of white noise. It's always there, filling the space, giving the other person something to respond to, agree with, push back against, partially accept. Your reasoning in constant circulation, being processed and evaluated and returned. When that stops, the space doesn't become empty. It becomes occupied by something different, by the weight of your choices, unmediated by your explanation of them, by the reality of what you actually do, without the interpretive layer you usually provide, by the experience of who you actually are when you stop narrating yourself to someone who is using the narration as leverage. People respond to this shift in ways that vary with the relationship. Some find it clarifying. They discover they actually understood you better than they thought, that the explanation was more for your comfort than for their comprehension. Some find it disorienting. The removal of the interpretive layer means they have to do more work to understand you, and that work is unfamiliar. And some find it, for reasons they can't articulate, somewhat frightening. Because a person who acts without explaining themselves is, functionally, a person whose next move cannot be predicted from their stated reasoning. And unpredictability, genuine, unperformed unpredictability, is one of the primary sources of involuntary respect. You cannot manage what you cannot anticipate. You cannot control what you cannot read. This is the stage where you'll notice that something in the texture of how people approach you has quietly shifted. Not that they agree with you more, not that conflict has disappeared. A slight additional care, a slightly different weight given to your words, precisely because you're now using fewer of them. This is what Stoic philosophy means in practice, when it talks about the power that comes from genuinely needing nothing from the people around you. The need for their understanding, for their correct perception, for their agreement with your reasoning. These needs make you legible in a way that hands others access they should never have had. Their removal makes you something different, not cold, not superior, just genuinely independent in a way that most people, however much they value independence in theory, have never actually fully experienced. Stage 6, the invitation. Months 2 to 3. This is the stage most people don't anticipate. At some point, the timing varies, but it almost always happens. You'll receive a different kind of approach from the person who has been trying to extract your explanations. Not another demand for justification, something that functions like genuine curiosity. They want to understand something, not to judge it, not to push back against it, not to store it as future leverage, because the months of operating without your narration have left them with a version of you that has more space in it than they're accustomed to. You'll feel the difference immediately. The request for understanding that was actually a demand for submission has a particular quality, a tightness, an expectation embedded in the question before it finishes being asked. The genuine curiosity has a different quality entirely. It's open in a way those earlier requests never were. This is the moment to say something true, not everything, not an explanation, something true, selected by you, offered from a position of having decided what to share, rather than what to defend. The message that arrives might look something like, "Hey, I've been thinking about things. I feel like I've been approaching you wrong. Can we talk?" And the response that completes the stage without undoing everything that came before it, sounds something like, "I'd like that. What's on your mind?" Not cold, not triumphant, just open, because you're no longer defending anything. Marcus Aurelius distinguished between speaking from the inside of yourself, from prohairesis, from genuine choice, and speaking from the outside of yourself, from a position of managing someone else's perception. The first kind of speaking has a quality that people feel even when they can't describe it. The second kind has a different quality, also felt, also difficult to articulate. What you offer in this moment should come entirely from the first kind, a true thing about how you see the situation, a genuine account of what matters to you. Not because they need it, not because the relationship requires it, but because you've decided this particular true thing serves both of you better than continued silence. That's the difference between explanation and communication. Explanation is driven by someone else's demand. Communication is driven by your choice. One transfers power, the other confirms where power actually resides. Stage 7. The new baseline, month 3 and beyond. The final stage is the one that makes everything else worth it. It isn't dramatic. It isn't a confrontation resolved or a misunderstanding cleared. It's quieter than that. It's a new baseline, a version of every important relationship where the implicit expectation that you owe anyone outside your actual inner circle an account of your reasoning has simply dissolved. Not because you became cold or indifferent, because you demonstrated stage by stage, through behavior rather than argument, that this expectation was never something you were actually obligated to fulfill. The relationships that remain, and some won't, and that tells you something you needed to know, operate differently. People engage with what you actually do and say, not with the justification you provide for it. Your decisions carry more weight, not less, precisely because they're no longer softened by the buffer of explanation. And there's something that happens internally in this stage that's harder to describe than any external shift. A kind of quiet. Not the quiet of someone who has nothing to say. The quiet of someone who has stopped participating in conversations they were never required to be part of in the first place. That quiet is what Epictetus called freedom. Not freedom from external circumstances. He was explicit that philosophy can't guarantee those. Freedom from the internal compulsion to make yourself legible to people whose reading of you was never something you could control. And once you found that particular kind of freedom, you'll understand why almost every philosopher who has taken the concept seriously describes it not as a technique or a practice, but as a state. Something you arrive at, something once arrived at, that is very difficult to be moved from. Which stage are you in right now? Write it in the comments. Not a description, just the number. 1 through 7, because the number of people at each stage is something I want to understand. And the pattern of where most people get stuck is something I want to address directly in the next video. Block 3. The practice. 20 minutes to 28 minutes. Everything in the 7 stages depends on the same foundation, and most people miss it entirely. The stopping has to come from the inside. Here's why this matters, and why this is the part that breaks down for almost everyone who tries this after watching a video like this one. They've understood the concept, they've accepted the logic, they've even experienced, briefly, what it feels like to hold their position under pressure. But they're doing it as a strategy. The moment it becomes a strategy, something you're doing to produce an effect in someone else's behavior, it starts to fail. Not necessarily because the other person detects the strategy, though sometimes they do. Because you're still organized around their response. The person performing non-explanation, waiting to see if it produces the desired effect, is in exactly the same position as the person who explains. Both are working on the territory that belongs to someone else's perception. They've just changed their approach to the task. The genuine version, the version that produces all 7 stages, that shifts dynamics in the permanent way, starts from a different place entirely. It starts from genuinely having decided something about what you owe other people. Not what's strategic to give them, not what will produce the best outcome in this specific situation. What you actually owe them is a genuine matter of how you understand your obligations as a human being. Here is the Stoic answer, stated precisely. The Stoics were not arguing that other people's perceptions don't matter. They were arguing something more specific and more useful. They were arguing that you contain 2 categories of things. Things that are genuinely yours, your choices, your intentions, your efforts, your values, and things that only appear to be yours, but actually exist outside you. The results of your efforts, the perceptions of other people, the outcomes of situations you don't fully control. Explanation, in almost every context where it's demanded rather than freely offered, is an attempt to manage the second category while pretending that managing it is your responsibility. It isn't. Your responsibility is the first category. What you actually do, how you treat people, the quality of your choices, the consistency between your values and your behavior. All of that, fully yours, fully your responsibility, fully worth your complete attention and honesty. What other people make of it never was. The daily practice. Every morning, not as an affirmation, not as motivation, but as a genuine cognitive exercise. Identify one relationship or situation where you've been providing explanations that weren't freely chosen. Not explanations you offered because you wanted to communicate something true. Explanations you provided because not providing them felt like a position you couldn't sustain. Identify the situation. Then ask yourself, with the clarity that morning usually provides before the day's pressure has arrived, what do I actually owe this person? Not what feels socially required. Not what avoids conflict. Not what produces their approval. What do I genuinely owe them? In most cases, the honest answer is far less than what you've been providing. You might owe them your genuine presence in shared contexts, your honesty when they ask a genuine question, your reliability in areas where you've made commitments, your basic respect as a human being. You probably don't owe them the inside of your reasoning for decisions that belong to you. You probably don't owe them justification for choices that affect them only indirectly. You almost certainly don't owe them the performance of uncertainty, the explanation that says, beneath all its surface content, I'm not sure this is right, and I need you to confirm that it is. This exercise, done consistently, begins to replace the automatic groove with something deliberate. The groove says, Explain, because not explaining is wrong. The deliberate practice says, choose what you share based on what you actually owe, not based on what the groove is telling you, what to say instead. Most people who decide to stop explaining face an immediate practical problem. They know what they're not going to do. They have no idea what to do instead. The answer isn't silence in every situation, though silence is underrated and worth practicing more than most people practice it. The answer is a different kind of language. Shorter, more declarative, less argumentative. 5 replacements that work in almost every situation where you would previously have explained, "That's not how I see it." Full stop. Not, "That's not how I see it," because just the position, stated, released into the air without a defense structure around it. I've made my decision. When decisions are being questioned rather than genuinely asked about. Not harsh, not cold, just final in a way that doesn't pretend the decision is still open for discussion when it isn't. I hear you. When someone is expressing disagreement designed to get you to justify yourself, you're acknowledging their experience without accepting the implicit invitation to submit to their frame. I think we see this differently. When you need to acknowledge disagreement without entering a defense of your position, makes the difference visible without treating it as a problem you're required to solve. And silence, simple, unperformed silence, held for a beat longer than is comfortable. That communicates one thing the other person will feel even if they can't articulate it. I'm not going to help you make this easier than it is. None of these are magic. None of them will immediately transform every difficult dynamic. But each one, used consistently, chips away at a pattern that has been operating for years. Each one represents a small choice, the language of a person operating from security rather than a person operating from need. And choices, repeated consistently, become character. The internal work, everything external, the phrases, the silence, the 7 stages, rests on something internal that most people skip because it's less concrete and less immediately satisfying than a list of techniques. You have to actually become less interested in being correctly perceived, not as a performance of not caring, as a genuine shift in what you're organized around. This is the hardest part, because most people, even people who intellectually understand that they shouldn't need external validation, are still spending enormous cognitive and emotional energy managing how they're perceived. The explanations are just the most visible expression of that organization. The internal work is the practice of noticing every time you're spending energy on the territory that belongs to someone else's perception, and genuinely, without drama, returning to the territory that's actually yours. Your choices, your intentions, your honesty about where you are and what you value. Every time. Not just in the big moments, in the dozens of small moments throughout a day where the pull toward managing perception activates automatically. This is what Marcus Aurelius was doing in his meditations, not writing philosophy for an audience, reminding himself daily of a distinction he kept crossing in practice even as he understood it in theory. The crossing is human. The returning is the practice. And the practice, sustained long enough, produces something you cannot manufacture directly and cannot fake convincingly. It produces a person who genuinely doesn't need to explain themselves. Not because they've stopped caring about what's true, because they've located where truth lives, inside the choices they make, not inside the interpretation those choices receive. And they've stopped confusing the two. Conclusion, 28 minutes to 30 minutes. Here is what I want to leave you with. The 7 stages aren't a formula for making other people respect you. They're a description of what happens when you stop trying to make other people respect you through the route that was never going to work. Explanation, in the context of demand, was never about communication. It was about position. And the position it produced, however good your reasoning, however compelling your argument, was always the same. You explaining, them evaluating. The way out of that position was never a better explanation. It was the genuine decision to stop treating their evaluation as something that required your participation. Marcus Aurelius returned to the concept of internal authority. The authority that comes not from position, not from title, not from anyone's approval, but from the alignment between your values and your choices, more than to any other single theme across the years he spent writing to himself. He did this not because he had achieved it and was documenting the achievement. He did it because he kept losing it in the ordinary friction of daily life, and he kept having to find his way back. That's what this video is. Not a description of a state you arrive at once and maintain effortlessly. A reminder of a distinction that you'll need to practice daily, that you'll lose in stressful moments and in the long-term dynamics that grind against your position over time, and that you'll need to return to again and again through exactly the exercises described here. Not explaining isn't coldness. It isn't arrogance. It isn't the affectation of someone who thinks they're above the normal requirements of human relationship. It's the recognition that the deepest form of respect you can offer another person, and yourself, is the confidence to act from your genuine values without treating their approval as the thing that makes those values real. Your choices are real whether anyone understands them or not. Your character exists whether anyone correctly perceives it or not. Your worth isn't something that requires demonstration. It either lives in what you actually do, or it doesn't live anywhere. Stop explaining. Watch what changes. Not in them, in you. That's always been the part that mattered most.